What's up everyone and welcome back to Reload Reacts episode 65. My name is Trey and today we are going to look through r/ProRevenge, the subreddit for those who get back at the ones who wrong them and are usually quite good at doing it. This first post is by Fluffy Supermarket 6. Fired from my job, but received a year's worth of pay and got my boss fired. This happened in the early 2010s, before the advancement of technology in video editing and content creation. I was hired as a content creator for a university that wanted to leverage YouTube to kickstart their branding campaign. The pay was low, roughly $2,200 USD, and in those days there were not that many video content creators around and the process usually took a long time from start to finish. I was hired and on my second day, my manager presented my KPI of 85 3 to 10 minute videos in 52 weeks, which was impossible for a one-man team in those days. That meant I had to do the scripting, producing, casting talents, shooting videos, composing music. They were way too cheap to pay for a royalty-free music subscription, and editing. All of which I had to use my own equipment and software because their computers and cameras were so old, they simply couldn't handle the strain of even doing things in 720p, much less 1080p. I tried to let my manager know, but she just smiled encouragingly, telling me to give it a try, assuring me if the videos were good, the quantity would not be what she focused on. Hearing this, I agreed to give it a try. My manager treated me well in the first month, however, one day, when she found out I was a smoker, her attitude changed overnight. A colleague had actually done a facepalm when I told her about it and she let me know that the manager hated smokers and often advocated to get them fired. She started nitpicking me on everything from smelling like cigarette smoke after my breaks, coming in 5 to 10 minutes late despite doing more than 4 hours of overtime daily, not being contactable during break times, the list goes on. But I soldiered on because I just wanted to do the work and do it well. 5 months in, I was called into the director's office where I saw my manager putting on her best displeased but gleeful face and I felt my stomach drop. The director told me that she was disappointed because she had heard that I was falling behind on my work and it was already halfway through the year and I had only completed 30 out of my 85 videos. I tried to explain that I had been working my butt off on these videos. I literally worked 6 days out of the week over 60 hours just to do what needed to be done. And that being a one-man army made things impossible. And also the fact that the videos I had put up grossed the highest views ever on their YouTube page. I also recounted how my manager said that she was looking for quality videos over quantity. The director dismissed this and stated that the KPI was simply 85 videos in a year, and since it was almost half a year in with my numbers at less than half, she felt it prudent to cut the cord early. I asked how they would even meet the KPI if they were to fire me now. My manager had snorted, saying, "Well, we'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director had given her an odd look, but nodded in her support nonetheless, telling me, "You don't need to worry, manager will get the job done." That was when a light bulb went off in my head. Seeing as I was the content professional in the office, one of my jobs was to keep a database of production houses to use in the event we needed to do a shoot that required more resources, and I was sure that they would be using the production houses in my database as my manager had no contacts in the production industry. So I changed the contact numbers and messed up all the emails on all of the entries except one. The one I had a friend working as a junior director, not assistant director, but a director assigned to smaller video projects. I gave him my call and told him of my plan, and sure enough within 2 days they were called to come in to pitch. I told him that I had a plan that was a win-win for us. It would instantly help him and put him on the fast track to a director position by bringing in that much business to his production house, and it would also benefit me financially. I would teach him exactly how to pitch to win over the boss and director in turn. His company would pay me a standard finder's fee of 15%. He agreed instantly and immediately put me on the line with his general manager, who upon realizing this was to be 6 months of work for a high 6-digit payout, instantly agreed and drew up a contract. As it turns out, after I gave them a metaphorical step-by-step playbook, they were the perfect fit, somehow understanding the needs and style of the university as well as the sort of themes the university wanted to feature. The director and my former boss were amazed that my friend's production house was so familiar with their content that they signed them up on the spot. Now, even back then, using a production house was not cheap. Each video that they produced could cost double to triple my monthly salary, given that they had specialized people for each function: producer, director, director of photography, gaffer, sound person, video editor, assistant director, production assistants, etc. But this meant that they could complete a video every 2 to 3 days. So yes, they produced 50 videos in a span of 4 months, for over 100 months of my salary, and I sat back and collected the healthy 15%, which was about 15 months of my salary. This allowed me to put money aside for a holiday, and the rest to further my studies with a respected film school overseas. I thought my plan ended here and I had gotten back at my former bosses, but to my surprise, I received a call from my colleague while I was holidaying in Bali one day. This was the same colleague who had facepalmed when I told her that my manager had found out I was a smoker. She told me that my former manager had been fired and my director given a massive blasting by the chancellor of the university. The content creation project which I was hired for was only given a budget equating to about 1.5 years of my salary, and they had exceeded that budget by over 10 times. My former manager was so desperate to ensure that her content creation project could be completed that she had thrown caution to the wind, paying anything to get the job done, so that she could show my director that she had completed the project and had approved the massive spend without getting consent from the director. So that is how I got my friend a super fast promotion to full director in his production house, and 1 year of pay after getting unfairly fired from my job. Yeah, I agree with this top comment here. People that have never done video editing have no effing clue how laborious that S is. I can't even imagine people that produce CGI. The disrespect that the creatives get from people who have never done those types of jobs is hard to believe. That's so true. What I do is quite easy, it's quite simple. But there are a lot of people that seem to think that I can just get here, sit down for 20 minutes, record a video, and then click upload. When really, it's record and then I'm here for about 2 to 3 hours a night editing a video. Or maybe multiple videos per night, but still, it's more than just the record and then click upload. It's a lot more complex than that, and I think a lot of people overlook that a lot of the time. This next post is by On This Our Day. Oh, I played the long game. I am by no means an expert or pro at revenge, but I am a patient person. I disclosed this to a friend and they directed me here. Throw away for obvious reasons. It's a long read, but the setup and backstory are important. 7 years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own place. I had saved for 10 years, worked my A off, and I was so happy to be able to have a place to call my own. Now, being a single person on the mortgage meant I had to make compromises. One such compromise was buying a property on a shared block, a lot cheaper. Where I'm from, this usually means it's on a strata title. For some, that's a bonus, as it means there's a communal fund for repairs. Typically, insurance is cheaper as it's collective, and other things like maintenance can be taken care of. Strata titles also come with a lot of bylaws and restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm a pretty private and introverted person, so having to deal with people and have limits on how I live was a no-no. I took my time, found the perfect property, shared block, but freehold title. Only thing was that I needed to pay public liability insurance for the shared walkway on the property, split equally between owners. The real estate agent is local to my area. There's also about 3 degrees of separation between us. He has friends who are friends with my friends type of thing. Didn't know him but knew of him, so that sort of felt good too. About 5 months after I move in, I get a knock on the door from the owner, landlord, of the property next to me to discuss insurance. Not a problem. I ask for a copy of the policy so I can get a record. It gets sent through and lo and behold, it's for strata insurance. I was incredibly confused, and after much back and forth, the property isn't a freehold title but a strata title. I called my lawyer who conveyed the title, etc. He was dumbfounded, but over it all, did the right thing and made things as right as they could. I arranged for a meeting with the real estate agent. I brought emails and printouts of the ads they had, all saying it was freehold. emails between the real estate agent and my lawyer discussing its freehold status. Despite it being an absolute black and white, he refused to accept any fault or offer to make things right. I don't begrudge that, he's looking out for himself, I get that. However, I won't forget it. I did enter into mediation with the real estate agent, and all I asked was, for when the time came for me to sell, they'd do it or cover the costs. I thought this was reasonable, but they flat out refused and offered me $1,000 to go away, which I refused. I had the option to pursue them legally, and was advised by the mediator to do so, but ultimately I decided against it for a few reasons, the main one being my health at the time. So I planned and plotted, and I schemed and connived as to how to get back at this son of a bee, and I settled on this. I found his personal Facebook page, which wasn't set to private, saw some photos of a boys on tour trip he went on a few weeks prior, so about 5 or 6 months after I bought the property. I found his address through a business registration search. On the anniversary of the sale for 6 years straight, I send them flowers with a note. Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day, she has your eyes. Love, L. They varied ever so slightly over the years, but always had on this, our special day, and some weird inference to a love child and a desire to reconnect. I also from time to time arranged for postcards and letters to be sent from another country. The one he was on tour in always signed Love, L. I learnt about 3 weeks ago that this guy had recently divorced, lost his home, and is no longer working as a real estate agent. His wife had found out he cheated on her. The story I was told through said friends of friends went along the lines of he would get weird gifts and flowers every year, same day every year. She, his wife, finally put 2 and 2 together and realised what the date was, and he admitted to cheating on her. Now, I didn't mean for this, but it turns out a year before I bought my house, he had gone on holiday, came back with an STD, gave it to his wife, but somehow convinced her that it wasn't him. As such, our special day turned out to be right around the time he'd have been deep in someone who wasn't his wife only 1 year earlier. He apparently lost his house, half his retirement savings, and also his business. I do feel a little guilty about all of it sometimes, but then I reminded that he's a scumbag and that karma, like me, is a patient, spiteful, and vengeful bee. Dude, that is some awesome revenge. F that guy. Somebody already did. This next post is by Kelsia IV. Hurt my friend, good luck with your education. Back in the before times when the internet was still a new thing with lots of potential, I was enrolled at my local junior college. A little into the semester I moved in with my GF so we could both save on rent. I would call my girlfriend Lucy for the purposes of this post. One night Lucy said she invited a friend from one of her classes for a game night. Sounded good to me. We invited a couple of other friends and it was a really fun night. Surprisingly, it turned out her friend, Sarah, was someone I knew from high school. We weren't close friends, but we knew each other and got along fine. After that night, Sarah was invited over pretty frequently for dinner, game nights, or to watch a movie. She even brought her boyfriend over a couple times. I'll call him Jay, but he never quite fit in. He would be quiet and or standoffish, wouldn't engage much, and just seemed like he never wanted to be there. It was clear no one really felt comfortable having him there, but we invited him to be polite to Sarah. Fortunately, he only came over 2 or 3 times, and found an excuse to refuse every other time. A month or 2 after all this started, Sarah called my GF crying and asked if she could come over. Of course we said yes. The story that was relayed was Jay was getting very upset with Sarah for coming to our place so frequently and accused her of cheating on him. She never clarified if he thought she was cheating with me, Lucy, or both, but any option was ridiculous and never happened. But he confronted her and started verbally assaulting her, calling her all kinds of nasty names. At one point, she tried to walk past him to leave, and he shoved her back. This caused her to trip over a coffee table, fall, and get a huge bruise on her butt and lower back. Lucy told me about the bruise as Sarah had shown her. I didn't see it for myself. Sarah swore up and down that he never physically assaulted her before, and she believed it was just an accident, but I was peed. I wanted revenge. You don't mess with my friends. You don't assault women. I wanted to beat the C out of him. But while I'm a very big guy, I've never been in a fight and I am not a violent person. But a revenge plan formed in my mind. At the time I was working in the administration building of the school as a student employee. As part of my job, I could access anyone's student record, their fees, and their class schedule. The date was fast approaching that was the last possible day to drop or add classes without penalty or specific permission, so I looked up Jay in the system, got his student ID number and other information that I needed, and put my plan into motion. On the last day to change schedules, I used the dedicated enrollment phones in the administration building. Internet class scheduling wasn't a thing that was set up yet, and cancelled all of his classes. Not only that, but I went through and added every class I could find that had a course fee. If you owed a debt at the school, you couldn't get copies or your transcripts or anything else. Something that I didn't mention was that Jay was a foreign student and couldn't stay in the country if he wasn't enrolled with a certain number of units. I wish I could give more info about the fallout, but as I didn't want this to get traced back to me, I didn't tell anyone, nor did I pull up his records again for quite a while. I did get a little payoff though. Sarah was really worried about seeing him again. She had broken up with him the night after he pushed her, as they had an English class together on Tuesdays. She said that on Tuesday he was there, but there was also someone new standing in the class. He was standing because there weren't enough seats. The teacher, seeing that there were more people than should be, held roll, and guess who wasn't on it? You're right, it was Jay. Apparently, after I dropped all his classes, someone on the waitlist got in. Jay tried to argue with the teacher, but as Teach had the official class roster and Jay wasn't on it, there was nothing he could do. Sarah said she never saw Jay in that class again. I don't know much more about what happened. Lucy and I eventually broke up, so I didn't see Sarah very often after that. After a while, I did look up Jay's class schedule, and all of the classes with course fees were gone, but he didn't have any other classes on the books either. I wanted to assume he was kicked out of school, but I didn't try to confirm it. Either way, Sarah didn't have a class with him, and while he probably deserved more, he was definitely inconvenienced and possibly kicked out of school. Sometimes I worry I was too harsh, but then I remembered that he deserved it. Mess with me, but not my friends. Fair enough, OP, fair enough. This next post is by BB Keys. The HOA President's Long Goodbye. When I moved out into my suburban neighbourhood, I expected peace and quiet. Instead, I walked into a petty dictatorship run by our HOA President, Todd. Todd was the worst kind of leader. The kind who loved power but hated accountability. He enforced ridiculous fines like fining people $200 for leaving their trash cans out a minute past 9 AM, but blatantly ignored the rules when it suited him. His own yard was a mess of unpermitted structures, and his fence was taller than allowed by city ordinances. But Todd's true sin? Using the HOA as his personal piggy bank. At first, I tried reasoning with him. My fence was slightly off colour because the approved stain wasn't available, and he fined me $500. I explained, provided receipts, and asked for leniency. Todd smirked, said, "Rules are rules," and walked away. That's when I decided I would take him down. Not with screaming or public arguments, but methodically, legally, and in a way he'd never recover from. Step 1. Become the inside man. Todd's first mistake was underestimating me. I volunteered for the HOA board under the guise of wanting to get involved in the community. I played the part of the eager, naive newbie perfectly. For 2 years, I attended every meeting, quietly observing how Todd operated. I learned he controlled the board by bullying other members and burying them in paperwork. He'd push through votes when only his allies were present, and conveniently lose paperwork submitted by dissenting homeowners. I kept my head down, took detailed notes, and waited. My goal was to outlast his term as president so I could begin making changes. Then I discovered Todd's second mistake. He wasn't just a bully, he was a thief. Step 2. Follow the money. Todd loved to brag about how he kept the HOA's finances in order, but something didn't add up. The annual HOA fees were high, much higher than in similar neighbourhoods, but the common areas were falling apart. The pool was closed half the summer due to maintenance issues, and the landscaping looked like it hadn't been touched in months. I started digging. As the HOA treasurer, Todd had access to all the accounts, but he was notoriously cagey about sharing financial details. I asked for the budget during the meeting, and Todd laughed it off, saying, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." I filed a formal request for the financial records, which under HOA rules, he was required to provide. Weeks went by with no response. That's when I started talking to neighbours. Turns out I wasn't the only one suspicious. Over a dozen neighbourhoods have requested access to the budget over the years only to be ignored. One neighbour claimed Todd had used HOA funds to install a new patio at his house, while another swore he'd seen Todd's kids at the community pool during its maintenance closure. Armed with these suspicions, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, forcing Todd to provide the records. He stalled, but I wasn't backing down. Step 3. Build the case. When Todd finally handed over the financial documents, they were a mess. Invoices were missing, payments were mislabeled, and some expenses were downright bizarre. A $15,000 landscaping fee paid to a company that didn't exist. Thousands spent on administrative costs with no explanation. I cross-referenced the HOA's bank statements with public records and found the smoking gun. Todd was funneling money to his personal accounts. Even better, I discovered Todd had been inflating contractor fees, pocketing the difference, and splitting the profits with his buddy, a shady contractor who handled most of the HOA's maintenance. I compiled everything into a detailed report, complete with spreadsheets, photos, and notarized statements from neighbours who had seen Todd's antics firsthand. Step 4. The coup. I waited for the annual HOA meeting, which was typically a snooze fest attended by only a handful of homeowners, but this time, I made sure people showed up. I spent weeks knocking on doors, explaining what Todd had been up to. I didn't share everything, just enough to get people angry and curious. On the night of the meeting, the room was packed. Todd started the meeting like usual, droning on about how difficult it was to manage the HOA and how much he'd sacrificed for the community. That's when I stood up. I calmly asked if he could explain some discrepancies in the budget. Todd laughed nervously and said, "I don't think this is the time or place." I replied, "Actually, Todd, it's the perfect time." I handed out copies of my report to everyone in the room. The mood shifted instantly. People started reading, whispering, and then shouting. Todd tried to regain control, but it was too late. I called for a vote to remove him as president, and by the end of the night, Todd was out. Step 5. The final blow. After Todd was removed, we hired an independent auditor to go through the HOA's finances. They confirmed everything. Todd had embezzled over $50,000, mismanaged tens of thousands more, and committed multiple counts of fraud. We reported him to the police and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. But it didn't end there. Todd's shady contractor buddy was also exposed and banned from doing business in the county. Todd had to sell his house and pay restitution and legal fees. His name became a running joke in the neighbourhood, and no one would touch him professionally. With Todd gone, we restructured the HOA to prevent another dictator from taking over. We implemented term limits, required multiple board members to approve financial decisions, and created an online portal so all homeowners could access budgets and meeting minutes. The aftermath. Every time I walk past Todd's old house, now owned by a lovely family, I smile. The pool is open, the landscaping is beautiful, and the HOA fees are lower than ever. Todd, meanwhile, moved to a neighbouring town, where he reportedly tried to join another HOA board, only to be laughed out of the room when someone googled his name. Justice wasn't just served, it was plated, garnished, and savoured. How is he not in prison? Okay, yeah, sure, why not? Good job, OP. This next post is by Compile Commit. Phone calls for the previous owner, who turned out to be my SE manager. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I had excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college. One nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i and a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitzer from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device specific, so each time I got a new phone I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I got my first job after graduating in 2009, and around 2010, I was assigned to a new project with notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for quite a while. He took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. Bits thrived on creating chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. Bits' presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail, yet was quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance that his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat, perfection or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared, yet Bits remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area as I was, and had gone to the same school, though years before me. In 2012, our company merged with the parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise, we got our MS Outlook and organization view. That was when I first learned about Bits from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitzer. Now the first name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could be someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into details, but it was evident that Bitzer and Bits were the same person. I'd been quite peeved with this unknown person named Bitzer for almost a decade by then, and Bits had been the bane of my and several others' existence for quite some time. This was where the revenge lies. First, I unblocked all the numbers in my phone. I was getting 5 to 6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, it increased to 15 to 18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying wrong number, I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided his current number to update their database. This is where I could be the butthole. I also volunteered his manager's number, in case he tries something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to find him for almost a decade. Banks had sold his debts to companies that harass people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he had been taking loans in everyone's names, his wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards of $200,000, equivalent in USD, but it's an S-load of money from where we are from. Apparently, he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but no one could find him. Probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when the manager started to get calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later. Haven't heard from him since. That is glorious. And not that this is an Are You the Butthole post, but you're not. You're fine. And with that, that's going to be it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stories in r/ProRevenge. Let me know what you'd like to listen to next in the comment section below. And also, please consider hitting that subscribe button because I post new Reddit content every single day. There are 2 videos on the screen, one of which is for the most recent video, and another is for a video the YouTube algorithm thinks you'll want to watch next. My name is Trey, this was Reload Reacts, and I will see you in the next video.